everyone, this is Mindy Eggen for Scrapbook and Cards Today magazine with more inspiration with the Let's Stamp Together kit for January 2025. This kit is featuring products from Pink and Maine with their classic pink die set. We have a frame and then also some hearts, scalloped hearts, and a love word die and shadow die. We have a stencil set with lots of hearts, also the stencil that coordinates with the stamp set. So there is that square shape down in the bottom left-hand corner that has the hearts. I will be using that image today and some really great heartwarming sentiments. I'm going to start using my Stamp Wheel 2.0 from Altenew, and I have a piece of white cardstock cut to 5.5 by 8.5. I'm going to make sure that that is placed down in the bottom left-hand corner. And then I have that square image for my stamp. It has a bunch of hearts in there. It's going to coordinate with the stencil. And this image is meant to be very whimsical. So the stencil's not going to match up perfectly with the image. So I want to stamp and stencil this image, but I want to cut some hearts out of it. So I'm going to start with my tried and true technique for ink blending, which is stamping this image in a light gray ink first. This is totally optional. You can start right away with a black ink, but I prefer to start with a light gray ink, which is why I always make sure my cardstock is tucked into that bottom corner so that I always have perfect alignment. So I wasn't sure how many of the hearts I could get out of this one background, so I'm going to stamp it 3 times. I'm going to flip my cardstock, again, tucking that down in that bottom corner, and then I'm going to ink up the stamp image and stamp it again. By flipping the cardstock, I don't have to worry about moving my stamp, and then this way, when I come back to stamp a black outline, it's always going to be in the exact same position. Now, I am going to grab one more smaller piece of cardstock. This is just cut to 4.25 by 5.5, and I'm going to stamp it one more time. I'm going to leave everything in place because I want to come back and stamp over the top once I'm done ink blending using a black pigment ink. The reason I do it this way by starting out with a light gray ink first is when I start ink blending, I don't have to worry about smearing any ink. And what I love about the stamp wheel is I can just flip my plate over so that the stamp is facing up, and I can put this off on the side until I'm ready to stamp again. To do my ink blending, I am using a 9 by 12 sticky mat from Altenew. Mine is not the cleanest, it is a very well loved, and I lined up one of the layers of the stencil over my stamped image. And again, these stencils are not meant to line up perfectly with your stamped hearts. They're supposed to be offset just a little bit. And I think that gives it a very whimsical and playful touch. Plus, I think it takes a little bit off the pressure on us crafters having to line things up perfectly. Now, that first layer of the stencil, I used a light carnation from Gina K Designs with a mini blending brush. I shifted my stencil over, lined up the next layer of the hearts, and this time I'm going to come in with sea glass ink. Again, I'm just quickly going over it. I honestly didn't plan on using the entire square of hearts. I only really meant to die cut out just one, but you're going to see that that plan changes a little bit. And I'm going to repeat these steps for ink blending with the other 2 squares that I had stamped. Now, once I have all of my panels ink blended, I'm going to take them back over to my stamp wheel. I'm going to place them down in the bottom corner, which is where I had started originally. And I'm going to ink up the image this time in a black ink. This happens to be Obsidian ink from Altenew. It is a pigment ink, so it does take a little bit longer to dry, but I find it gives just the most amazing crisp results. And once I stamp this image with the black lines, everything just comes together perfectly. And it is such a fun look to these hearts. So once I have this one stamped, I am just going to flip my cardstock to stamp the other one. And then I'll also bring in my third panel and stamp that as well. Now, a couple different things that I could have done, or if you want to try, is starting by stamping those hearts in the black pigment ink and heat embossing it with a clear embossing powder. You could do that as well, or heat embossing it with maybe a gold embossing powder if you're worried about smearing any of the black ink when ink blending. So as I mentioned, the pigment ink does stay wet just a little bit longer, so I am going to hit that with my heat tool to quickly dry that ink so I don't transfer any of that onto my cutting plates. I'm going to trim down these pieces using my guillotine trimmer. And this is going to, for one, allow me to save those scraps of white cardstock, which is just a white, smooth cardstock. I think this one was hammer mill, but any type of white cardstock will work for this technique. And I can save those scraps for future projects. But this also allows me to use my mini die cut machine, which I have sitting off on the side. The original plan was just to use that one big heart, but as I was playing, I found I could get the other hearts on there as well. They're a little bit smaller in size. So I'm going to hold them down with a low tack tape and I'll just die cut those as well. And then I can just have them off on the side for future projects. I didn't plan on using them for today's project, but since I already had the background done, it's really nice to just have those ready to go. I die cut these with my mini intricate die cut machine from Gina K Designs, and now I have all of those super cute hearts to play with for the front of my card. Now I'm just playing with the design of my card. So I'm going to use a card piece. I think this is Windy from Spellbinders. It's one of their new cardstock colors. And I have a scallop die cut from Blush Cardstock. So a really nice kind of light blue slash teal color. And then that light pink I thought matched really well with my colors that I ink blended. I like to fiddle with my design, and then while I'm thinking about it, I'm going to layer up my love die cut word. I die cut it 3 times from black cardstock, and I'm going to layer it together with the Honeybee Stamps Precision Tip Glue. So while that is drying, I can attach my hearts together. I have some foam tape that I put behind my patterned paper that I created, and adding them to that pink scallop heart. These make the cutest embellishments. I really don't attach anything to my card front until I'm 100% sure of what I'm going to do. And I was still thinking about this background. It is beautiful as is with just the plain cardstock in the background, but I really felt it needed something. And one of my favorite go tos to have something in the background is using this snowfall background from Gina K Designs. I call it the splatter background because it kind of looks like splatter to me. I personally love to add splatter to my backgrounds, but it can be very unpredictable and messy. And this is kind of just a safe go to if you want a little added interest to the background. So I am stamping that in that sea glass ink onto the background. And full disclosure, I tried stamping it in a white pigment ink at first, which of course didn't show up because the cardstock is so light. And I really wasn't in the mood to heat emboss, so I cleaned my stamp and stamped it in the sea glass, but I apparently didn't clean my stamp very well because I transferred some of that pigment ink to my ink pad, but I'm just wiping that off of my ink pad with a paper towel. I'm going to trim my background down so that way I have a white border going around the front of my card. And I start by just taking a little smidgen off of each edge so that my finished size is going to be 4 by 5 1/4. If you have a rectangle die or maybe even a stitched rectangle or master layout, you could use one of those to trim it out as well. I was pretty settled on the layout idea for my card, so I had that laid out right here and I brought it back over to my stamp wheel. There is a smaller sentiment off of that stamp set that I wanted to stamp directly onto the background. So I inked that up in the Obsidian ink once again. I'm sorry the video kind of jumped to it because my camera went just a little bit out of focus while I was stamping that. I'm going to pop up my stamped panel with some foam strips, and then after I remove the backing, I'm going to add this to an A2 size card front. So this is 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, and it's going to leave me just a little bit of a white border in the background. And then I'm going to add a liquid glue behind each of these scalloped hearts. And the idea with the scalloped hearts being scattered across the front of the card is I did not want them to be perfectly lined up. So the top heart and the bottom heart, I'm going to make sure are off just a little bit. I prefer it when it's a little bit more scattered versus lined up. So once I attach those, I'm adding liquid glue behind my die cut word love. And then I'm going to place a heavy block on it and let that sit for just a minute while that adheres. And that's going to finish off my card project today, featuring the Let's Stamp Together kit from Pink and Maine for January 2025. And keep in mind, even though this looks very Valentine-ish, I think this would make a great greeting card to brighten somebody's day for any occasion. Thank you all so much for spending time with me today.